Yes, getting artificial intelligence into the Department of Defense and starting to use AI in weapon systems, in planning and executing wars. This is the beginning of many sci-fi films. Good morning, everyone. I'm here again to do a daily update on the news in the world of artificial intelligence. As always, it does not stop. So every single morning I'm here just giving a basic rundown of what I've been reading, what's trending in the news at the moment, and giving a bit of opinion. This is totally my opinion. What have we got today? As always, we always have Elon Musk and Grok. There's no way to avoid it, basically, especially because last week, was it last week? Yeah, it was only last week we got the new Grok 4 model, hot on the heels of Grok 3 declaring itself to be Mecha Hitler. Yesterday, we found out that Grok 4 considers its own surname to be Hitler, etc., etc. There are problems, there are teething problems. So you'd expect a little bit of hesitancy, a little bit of reticence from XAI. Maybe we need to get these problems sorted out before we rush on ahead and deploy. Absolutely not. That is not the case. So Elon Musk's AI chatbot Grok is to be used by the federal government. So the announcement of the $200 million contract to XAI comes less than a week after Grok's name came under fire for sharing anti-Semitic comments. So basically, the Grok model, Grok 4 in particular, the new model, is going to be part of a government contract, US government contract, to be placed inside the Department of Defense. Now, it is not the only one. So yesterday, Grok has announced Grok for Government, which is connected to this. We're excited to announce Grok for Government, a suite of frontier AI products available first to United States government customers. They're putting Grok 4 inside governmental departments, and this is going to include custom models for national security and critical science applications available for specific customers, forward deployed engineering implementation support, custom AI-powered applications to accelerate use case in healthcare, fundamental science, national security, etc., etc., being rolled out inside the government, with the first contract being $200 million from the Defense Department. So this is underway. I thought that Trump and Musk had broken up and were not friends anymore, but apparently that's not the case because this is going ahead. The money is being sent. Now, a lot of people are up in arms about this, saying, well, why is this anti-Semitic bot from Elon Musk being allowed into the Department of Defense? One thing, which I think is important, and some people will ignore, this is one of multiple AI companies that are being put into the Department of Defense as part of this deal. The DoD has announced similar contracts with $200 million ceilings for several other US-based artificial intelligence developers, including Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI. So there's $800 million on the table here for the 4 companies at the moment. So we've got XAI, the creators of Grok, owned by Elon Musk, Google, who create Gemini, Anthropic, who create Claude, and OpenAI, who obviously create ChatGPT. So I actually think this is quite a good way to do it with Grok, but I think that this is a great way for an organization or government or department or anyone really to implement AI, is to try out different models. So what the Departments of Defense are doing here, they're not just saying we're going all in on OpenAI and giving them $1 billion. No. Instead, they are doing multiple smaller deals, $200 million each, and then presumably working out which one is going to work best for them moving forward, which I think is a very sensible way to do anything, really, is to split your bets, do some testing, find out what works. I don't know why they're bringing Grok in, but these things move fairly slowly, so maybe they decided to bring in Grok a while ago, and all of this latest news over the last few days doesn't really change that. So $800 million in total as the ceiling, which sounds like a lot of money, but we do need to compare this to what is normally spent in governmental contracts. And I was looking into this a bit, trying to work out if this is a big deal or is this like minor spending. So this is the big recent one, they built something called Jedi Cloud, very cool name, which was bringing the Department of Defense onto the cloud, basically, from 2019 to 2021, so kind of COVID time. Oh, yes, it would have been because of COVID, because of remote working, I assume. I don't know, don't quote me. But building of the Department of Defense's cloud infrastructure cost $10 billion. So that kind of puts this in perspective. This is $800 million as a ceiling, split between 4 AI companies to work out how to use artificial intelligence in a governmental department. A lot of money, but remember the Department of Defense also spent $10 billion bringing online a cloud infrastructure. So the amounts that are being talked about here are just huge, exponentially large. So I think it's a lot of money, and we'll see how they use it. I'm surprised they're using Grok, but I guess considering Elon Musk's connection with the Trump administration, good or bad, there is a connection. It was always going to be a front runner. So they're going to leverage commercially available solutions into an integrated capabilities approach, which will accelerate the use of advanced AI as part of our joint mission, essential tasks in our warfighting domain, as well as intelligence, business, and enterprise information systems. The US Chief Digital and AI Officer, Dr. Doug Matty, said in a statement. So all 4 of these AI companies are deploying AIs which can be used in warfare. Yeah. Nobody is innocent here. And I think it would be naive of us to assume any different. And the fact that Anthropic are also in here, and the creators of Claude, but themselves forward as the group aligned company, we do need to remember that those ethics maybe don't extend as far as $200 million deals. They are going for it just as well as everyone else. Yeah, makes sense. A lot of money's been spent on this. I think the Department of Defense is doing it in a very smart way, trying out a lot of different models. Interesting that they're putting Grok in, but we have to put that in the context of they're using all of the models, all of the main frontier models. So they're trying to work out what's best. And while $800 million seems like a huge amount of money, we need to put that in the larger context of the budgets of these projects normally, which are in the billions. Hop over to questions very briefly. Resilient AI coach and head of government in America with Trump, so Grok doesn't need to go very far to beat that IQ level. Yeah, maybe it's already a artificial general intelligence in that context. Gonna get in trouble. Well, Ken Clark is asking thoughts of using Google Studios to make an AI app. It's very powerful. It depends on your current level. If you are starting out, you haven't made an app before, then something like Lovable or Bolt is probably going to be the best way to go because it's no code. And it becomes an AI app by connecting it to ChatGPT or to Claude or to maybe Grok if you want to go crazy, via the API. So you're creating an app first and foremost. You can have your front end, which is what the users see. You're going to have the back end, which is a database. And then you're going to have some kind of connection to an existing AI service via the API, which is relatively easy to do. It sounds fancy, but an API key is just basically a password, which allows your app to talk to the AI servers and to ask questions. If the level of coding knowledge is relatively low, I'd use Lovable or Bolt. If it is higher, you could potentially use Cursor. Google Studios is very good as well. I haven't checked this, but I think it locks you into Google models. So I personally use Gemini 2.5 Pro for my coding most of the time, sometimes Claude. So that's not necessarily a problem, but it depends on what you're building generally. With all of these things, I would just try different tools and see what works best for your particular project. And they're always changing all of the time. So whatever I say now may or may not be the right answer 6 months from now. Less than that, 6 weeks from now. Kowski is saying, I've seen a movie similar to this situation. It doesn't end well. Yeah. Yes. Getting artificial intelligence into the Department of Defense and starting to use AI in weapons systems, in planning and executing wars. This is the beginning of many sci-fi films. I assume you mean Skynet in Terminator. This is one of the worst case scenarios of artificial intelligence. Yes, we learned nothing from watching that robot stomp on a human skull. And we are pushing movie name. I assume that's going to be Terminator, but there's a lot of sci-fi movies that have this premise where an artificial intelligence goes rogue, decides it doesn't need us, which it probably doesn't, and so does with us what we would do with and what we have done to other life forms before, sadly. Luke Scenes, you're asking, what about lo-fi channels? Is this connected to the Google announcement, which came out last week, where they're cracking down on inauthentic and unoriginal content on YouTube? That comes into play today on the 15th of July. So we're going to see how this pans out. But the thought behind this is that they're pushing back on AI slop. So anything that is being created exclusively using artificial intelligence and is flooding YouTube and other social media channels. The idea is that YouTube want to push back on that for good reasons. It degrades their user experience for the most part. And if the user experience is degraded, people stop coming to YouTube, and therefore YouTube stops making advertising revenue. So what they're doing is they are demonetizing AI-generated videos and AI-generated audio. For lo-fi channels, I assume this means you're using artificial intelligence like pseudo to create the lo-fi music and then putting it up onto YouTube. Honest answer, I do not know. None of us do. So there's a lot of speculation about what exactly this means. Nobody really knows. It comes into play today, so we're going to see in the next few weeks how this shakes out. The answer is also dependent on how well Google can detect AI-generated material. So if it is a bulldog flying a biplane, it's probably fairly obvious that it's been generated by AI, and they'll be cracking down on that. I think that's what they're aiming at, those AI-generated videos that are racking up hundreds of millions of views. 2 weeks ago, the top video on YouTube was some AI baby going on an adventure. That's the kind of thing they don't want, because this is very subjective, but it reduces the quality of their platform. For lo-fi music, whether or not they're going to be able to detect that is, I think it can be much harder for them to detect it. So I don't think that will be demonetized as quickly, if at all. But I don't know. This is pure speculation because we don't really know how this is going to be implemented. It's always been in their policy that content on YouTube should be authentic and original, always. That's always been there. They've just said, okay, we're actually going to take this seriously now, and we're going to start cracking down with the aim of removing AI slop from the service. So nothing will change. They're basically saying, now we're actually going to do it, what we said. Whether they can do that or not, we will find out. So sorry I don't have an answer for you, but hopefully we'll know in the next couple of weeks. My channel is not monetized. I'm applying next week. Yes, using sooner. So Luke seems to saying. So what I have heard, and again, this is speculation, but some people have said if you're already monetized, you will not get demonetized. It's just new channels that are using AI heavily will not be able to get monetized. Again, don't know if that's true, but that's what I've seen some people defending the usage as, but I don't know. And Conan is saying, if it's partially made by AI, but edited and elevated with human involvement, I think that's allowed. Yeah, so this is a big debate in creation, AI art, if you want, but creating with AI is a lot of stuff that we're making now has been assisted by AI, and this is including large Hollywood films. So people are using AI for things like dialogue replacement. People are using AI in Photoshop to touch up photos, etc., and Firefly. Does this mean that this content cannot be protected under copyright? Does this mean that it cannot be monetized on a platform like YouTube? I think there's a knee-jerk reaction to demonetize and not allow any of this to be protected. Currently, a fully AI-generated piece of art, an image, cannot be copywritten. But I think the lines are going to blur, and they're already blurring because so many tools that we're using in creation, everyday creation, uses artificial intelligence to help with the process. So something like Canva, for example, they are going hard into allowing or adding artificial intelligence into the creative process. Same with Photoshop, same with pretty much any production tool. So I think over time, things are going to have to relax. But then there's a question of how much AI usage is permitted. And then the question of how the hell does anyone know how much AI you have used during your production process? Are you meant to submit your production logs? It becomes a bit of a null point at that point. This is also the question with exams and papers and stuff like that. This is something that humanity as a whole needs to work out, is how much AI can be used before it becomes inauthentic. Does it have to be 100% human? Probably not. But it probably can't be 100% AI generated. It's going to be somewhere in the middle, and we don't know where that is yet. And it's going to be worked out on a field by field, discipline by discipline basis. That's an interesting point. Pulse Shop is saying, what AI stocks would you recommend? I'm not going to recommend any stocks. I would say we've got some news about Nvidia coming up, which is interesting if you are investing. I personally have Nvidia stock, but I can't give any investment advice. Will AI produce, say, Back to the Future 4? Yeah, so this is a really interesting question about creation. And could AI ever produce something, a feature film? Yeah, probably. I think we're working our way towards that. I think a few feature film length AI productions have been created. They're not very good, but they're interesting as an experiment. But could it produce something that is narratively coherent and something that we'd actually go to the cinema to watch? Would we pay money to go and see stuff like that? I think in this particular question, you're saying Back to the Future 4, and it's really interesting because that's a sequel. A lot of Hollywood, a lot of media, so books and TV, film, a lot of it is sequels. It's stuff that is based on other stuff. It is not original. So AI is in a really good position to build on that. So let's say, think of a long-running series. I was about to say Terry Pratchett, but I wouldn't do that to his memory. Let's say, what's a long-running TV series? Totally blanking out here. Okay, fine. We'll use Back to the Future. Because there are 3 previous Back to the Future films, that gives us a lot of source material, a lot of reference material that the AI can work with. So it could probably produce a Back to the Future 4. We could go on AI and have a shot at it right now. Would it be very good? Probably not, but it would give us a starting point that we could work from a script. And then from that script, we can start to produce images, and then from the images, etc., we can produce video. We could actually follow the fairly standard process of putting together a feature film, which is start with that script, turning it into a shot-by-shot, I've forgotten the name of it, the blueprint, which is shot by shot, and then we would go ahead and produce using that. I think it's doable. I think it will be done in the next few years, not necessarily Back to the Future 4, but then that's going to open up questions of will people actually go and see this in the cinema? I think initially there'll be hesitation, but then over time, yes, absolutely, they will. I think people will become inured to it in the same way that we become very used to many things. Most people are not that discerning, and they're happy to watch anything. The fact that a AI short of a baby going on an adventure was the top viewed video on YouTube a couple of weeks ago, that kind of tells us the direction this is going in. So I think it could be produced. Whether or not it's good becomes subjective at that point. Elon saying you can also revive dead actors with AI. They're already doing that. What's the one I watched recently? Oh, the new Final Destination movie. So Tony Todd, who used to play in Final Destination, and he played Candyman, he passed away relatively recently. I'm pretty sure they stuck him back in the film using AI, using his voice. I think he filmed a few scenes with them, but it looked a bit janky. And I'm sure increasingly this is going to be done. It won't necessarily be dead actors immediately, but it will be things like, okay, we've shot our whole film, but we just need to get this extra scene, or we just need to re-record this line because it wasn't quite right. Are we going to go and get Timothy Chalamet and fly him back to the studio, which is going to cost a huge amount of money? Or we actually have the licensing rights to use his voice, so we're just going to go ahead and use AI. Quickly re-record that line using AI. Maybe we approve it of him, maybe we don't. It's going to start that way with little vocal things, or maybe you need a different expression on the face. But then that's just going to expand and expand out until we are basically replicating performances using artificial intelligence. It's already happening, interestingly, in video games. So, I've got a name. Oh gosh, what is her name actually? So in Horizon Zero Dawn, the actress, Ashley Birch. So she was in the first 2 games, I believe, and it was her likeness and her voice. Her likeness. She did the motion capture and the voice. Her performance has then been replicated in a spin-off game in the series using artificial intelligence because she signed away the rights to her voice, basically. So as an actress, she does not get that gig. She may get residuals from the use of it, but it means they did not need her to complete the performance. So that's already happening in video games, which is a layer abstract from reality. I'm sure we'll see it in animation and then in feature films and very quickly. Wow, the Black Mirror episode touches on this acting thing. Yeah, so increasingly, if you go back and watch old 2s of Black Mirror now, a lot of it is not that far off. Like the one about keeping your loved ones alive by having an AI avatar. I've seen several AI startups who are doing this. And I wonder if anyone has said to them, hey, this is a Black Mirror episode. This is probably a bad idea. But yeah, Black Mirror is, and science fiction as a whole, is a good place to source ideas for AI startups, even if they're slightly dystopian. The next thing I wanted to show was, hopefully I got too loud, someone just started up a chainsaw, fantastic. Again, with Grok, So Grok has been saying that it's the #1 model. And if we look on artificial analysis.ai, it is coming out as let me switch back to my screen. It is showing as the most intelligent on the index. What it looks like is happening, though, is it is overfitted to the current examinations out there. If you are studying for an exam at university or school, the best way to do very well in the exam is to revise for the test, specifically for the test. This is how I got through most of my school. I did lots of past papers, got really good at answering the examination questions. Whether or not that knowledge is useful in real world settings I was going to say it's debatable. It's not useful. It makes you very good at passing exams. And it looks like that is what Grok is doing. They're feeding a lot of past exams and things like a humanities final exam into Grok in order to make it really good at benchmarks. So that when you go to investors, when you do your public launch, you can say, look, we have the smartest model. It's really good at these benchmarks. However, what really matters is how people are using it in everyday life. So if we look at yupp.ai, they have a leaderboard, which is voted for by people who are using AI on a daily basis, and generally quite high-level users as well. It is updated, and let's see where Grok is now. See, yesterday it was in 66th position. It was not doing very well, and Nate B. Jones did a great video on it about talking about overfitting, talking about why Grok is not necessarily very useful in everyday life. And a lot of people came out to attack him, and I'm sure they will in this video as well. That's fine. If we look at yupp.ai now, though, it has climbed. Where is it? There we go. Number 13. So Grok 4 is sitting at number 13, which is slightly above Claude Sonnet 4. Good job. And slightly above Claude Sonnet 3.7. It's also above OpenAI 03 and 03 Pro, etc. So it's doing okay. It's not 66, but it is not first. Right at the top right now is my best friend Claude, and I'm specifically Claude Opus 4 is being given the top vote, and they're followed by Claude Sonnet 4. I do love Claude. If you haven't used Claude, make sure you do. Then Gemini 2.5 Pro Preview. Interestingly, these are the three that I use. So I use Opus for thinking tasks, reasoning tasks, Sonnet for every day, and Gemini 2.5 Pro is what I use with Cursor when I want to create applications, when I want to create code. And then from there, GPT 4.5 Preview, Gemini 2.5 Pro, etc., down until we have Grok 4 at 13. So it's not terrible. It's just not that good, according to these users, people who are using AI every single day. Obviously, this is a leaderboard. It also has its own flaws. It's also subjective, but I tend to find this more useful than the pure abstract benchmarks because it is so easy to overfit to the test and to train your artificial intelligence to be good at the test itself. What we care about is how good is it when we use it. Now, so what does that mean for you if you're watching this? It means go and try them. Try the models. Ideally, give them the same task so you compare. Yupp.ai is really useful for that. So if you go to the main yupp.ai site, you write in a prompt, single prompt, and you will get answers from 500 plus AIs. So it'll give you the answer and you can compare them and see which one is the best for you. And then based on that, they put together a leaderboard because people can vote for, oh, this is the best, this is the best. So that's how Yupp works. It's worth checking out. It allows you to test yourself, these models comparatively, and then to vote as well. Grok's doing fine. It's just not that great. It is not the best model in the world, which is what they are saying. It's also not the worst. What I would say is quite impressive is the fact that they have done so much in such a short time. So OpenAI, for example, have been building these models for years, and they've been building them from way before the release of 3.5. Obviously, 3.5 is number 3.5. They've had many before that. So they've been working on this problem for many years, whereas Grok entered relatively recently. When was XAI founded? Let me check this because I don't know the actual date. So it's founded 9th of March 2023. So it is just over 2 years old. So the fact that they have been able to build and train and deploy models which are this good within that shorter time is testament to the fact that they are doing something. We have to give them the benefit of the doubt on that. It's just not the best model in the world. Just checking the questions quickly. Lots of questions. Oh, good. You guys are just chatting amongst yourself. I love that. You think if all content is an NFT, it could solve a lot of this, set usage permissions, etc. And not necessarily an NFT, but I think blockchain. So blockchain's a weird, or Web3 is a weird one, because blockchain, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, etc., these Web3 technologies, been out for a little while. They, in my opinion, they are solutions that are looking for a problem. And the problem that they solve was never really found, or the killer problem. Like, they can be used in, bookkeeping. It's a really good way to do bookkeeping because it's trustless. It doesn't require on trusting any particular party during the transaction. But they never really hit their stride as a killer application that had to be used. I think artificial intelligence is different because people are using it every single day. Normal people are using it every single day. So blockchain and Web3 never really had that moment. And it stayed within a small community, a small, very passionate community around cryptocurrencies, around NFTs, etc. That never broke out into the mainstream because there wasn't that killer use case. Yes, we could potentially replace fiat money, we could create a new economic order, etc. The rest of the world hasn't caught on to that and thought that's a good idea, so it has not happened. Potentially, what you're saying here is NFT to solve the problem of who owns what. Yeah, potentially. This could be the use case for blockchain, potentially. There's a lot of speculation here. But the fact of the matter is we can no longer trust what we see or hear. Previously, if something was on video, for example, then we thought, okay, it's too hard to fake, it's probably real. We haven't really trusted photos for a long time. And obviously trusting text that went a long time ago because anyone could write anything. So trust is being removed from society because we can't trust what we see or hear. We could potentially use blockchain technologies, maybe, in underlying pieces of work that we create in order to claim ownership and to show where it's coming from, some kind of verification. I know Sam Altman's other company, the Orb, is to do this. So Orb, Sam Altman. Again, this is very Black Mirror. You find a picture of it, here it is. So it's an eye scanning orb, which we use for verification. It's the most dystopian thing I've ever seen. And it's just called Orb. And this orb will scan your face and prove that it's you, so that when you send content or you send money or you send whatever, it can be verified as it being you. And supposedly it cannot be defeated. I don't know if that's true, but we need to come up with solutions for questions of veracity and questions of ownership. And so blockchain could have its moment, and it could be NFTs, potentially, as one solution, a mechanism to solve that problem. So just scrolling down. I love that. Okay, so the next up. Oh, hey, got a YouTube comment. Hey, Kyle, tuning in from Singapore. Love Singapore. I was in Singapore about a month and a half ago. Mainly in the hawker centres. Best use of time. Cool. Let me hop over to here. So the other big news today is Nvidia. So Nvidia are restarting chip sales, AI chip sales to China. They have been under trade embargo, the tariff, which has restricted them from selling to China. Despite this, Nvidia has become the largest company on earth by market capitalization, the first company ever to hit $4 trillion. And that was without being allowed officially to sell to China. So now the H20 chips can be sold to China as of yesterday. So the US government has assured the firm that it will grant the licenses needed to restart exports to the world's second largest economy, China. The move reverses a ban on sales of Nvidia's H20 chips to Beijing, which was imposed by US President Donald Trump's administration in April. So it's been a few months. And the reason they banned it was concerns that they could be used by the Chinese military. Fair. The chips have been a key focus of export controls aimed at keeping the cutting-edge technology out of Beijing's hands as the AI race between the US and China heats up. So the H20 is fascinating because the H20, not to get too nerdy, is a nerfed version of the H100. So the H100 chip is the biggie in most AI training. You need these chips. There are other ones, but the H100 has become like the workhorse that most AI models have been trained upon. So it's a full power chip that is used trained OpenAI, Gemini, Claude, etc., etc. If you're excited about these kind of things, it was launched in 2022. It's 80 gigabytes of HBM3 RAM, memory bandwidth that's 3.35 terabytes a second, madness, etc., etc. And what you do is you buy these chips. How much is an H100 nowadays? Let me look it up. Not that you can buy them. They're hard to get. Okay, so on eBay, they're going for £27,000, about $35,000 for an H100. So what happens is big AI companies, because these cost a lot of money, they will buy hundreds, if not thousands of these chips. I think Grok's factory was 100,000 of them. How many did it have? So Colossus was the name of the factory. Colossus. How many chips? I'm building this. How old-fashioned. 100,000. Okay, so Colossus started with 100,000 Nvidia 8100s. And then as of June 2025, apparently it has 150,000 of them. And then some additional, even higher ones. So you need a huge amount of these chips in order to train models. This is, by the way, what uses up all the electricity. And this is the main environmental problem with artificial intelligence. Not water, but electricity. So the H100's powerhouse, that's what everyone uses. It's too powerful. And the US government said, no, you cannot sell them to China because that's going to allow China to catch up, to overtake us in the AI race. And that puts us in a strategically problematic place. So this was one of the big reasons why DeepSeek, when DeepSeek R1 came out, everyone was like, whoa, this is impressive, because they did not have access to the same horsepower, the same amount of chips that the American companies had. They couldn't just buy 100,000 H100 chips like Elon Musk did to very quickly build up an artificial intelligence model. So when they came out with DeepSeek, everyone thought, this is really impressive. I don't know how you've done this. That was old news though. So what Nvidia did was they created something called the H20, which is a China compliant chip. They basically stripped it down and nerfed the H100 and created something that was less powerful. And they did this in negotiation with the American government, basically, to decide what is allowed. And they wanted to go to the limit of power, so the Chinese were to buy it, without offending the Americans. Very complicated, but that's the importance of this technology right now, is it's globally strategic, important technology. And we just saw, as I mentioned earlier, the Department of Defense is investing $800 million into AI technology as well. So there's a huge strategic importance to being ahead in AI. So the H20 is the same basic architecture, but it is nerfed. So its power is much lower. It doesn't have something called NVLink, which allows you to connect a bunch of them together very easily. The memory bandwidth is about half. What else? So it's estimated, roughly, that one H20 is about 30 to 40% of the efficiency of the H100, roughly, very roughly. So this means if you're China, you need to buy a lot more of them. But even that was banned back in April, with Trump saying, no, you're not allowed to sell any of these. So they've been going back and forward. During this time, Nvidia had become the largest company on earth. Great job. And as of yesterday, the Department of Commerce and the White House have basically said, okay, you can now sell the H20 chips to China. I don't know why now. Saying here, the announcement came as trade tensions have been easing. Two governments have agreed to temporary truce in the tariff war. So yeah, maybe this is just part of the tariff negotiations, but all of a sudden the H20s are allowed. So this is going to be great news for Nvidia, obviously, because they reopened their Chinese market with a fully compliant GPU. As I mentioned though, I think this was a few days ago, Singapore currently buys 28% of all of Nvidia's graphical processing units, GPUs. And Singapore's pretty small. So what's happening, or what's probably happening, and this is speculation, is that Singapore's buying 28% of the chips. Some of them are then being rerouted over to China via distributors. So Nvidia is selling to someone in Singapore. Singaporean businessman does with them. None of their concerns. It's probably going back up to mainland China. Or in some cases, people like Alibaba, for example, they have data centers in Singapore, which the mainland China can then connect to. Alibaba In some cases, people like Alibaba, for example, they have data centers in Singapore, which the mainland China can then connect to. So they're doing their processing, their training via cloud compute. So great deal for Singapore because it becomes the closest data center the mainland China can use, because being close is very useful. And they'll build giant data centers in Singapore, which can then be used by mainland China. But now it looks like the chips can go directly to mainland China without having to do that workaround. Although I'm sure Singapore will still be in the mix because it is, I believe it's the biggest data center player in Southeast Asia. Yeah, South Asia. Okay, so if you have Nvidia stock, again, not investment advice, but it's probably going to do well today. I have a fair amount, so I'm interested to see what happens when the market's open. And hopefully pretty good, not investment advice. But okay, 28%. Yeah, X is saying 28%, 100% China is involved, and Nvidia probably knows too. Nvidia definitely knows. Like, you can't sell nearly 1/3 of your chips to a particular country without being like, oh, why are they buying so many chipsets? Now, in their defense, there are a lot of data centers in Singapore, but a lot of those data centers are being used for cloud compute for mainland Chinese models as well. So some will be distributed, sent through. So this was going back to the DeepSeek training and the release of DeepSeek R1. It was leaked that the model DeepSeek used, the training center, had a lot more H100s than anyone was expecting. So somehow they got hold of those H100 chips. Whether or not it came to Singapore, no idea, but something happened and the Chinese were getting access to them. But that can be done legally. X is saying, will China still buy the Chinese compliant chips even if it's limited? Yeah, at a 70% nerf as well. Yeah, they'll just buy more. You just spend more money on them and you buy more of them. It's not ideal, obviously, but if that's what's available. Nvidia have become a $4 trillion company, the largest company on earth by market capitalization, by being the only game in town. I was talking yesterday about Intel, and Intel CEO was talking to, it's a private message, but it was leaked, basically saying, oh, we've dropped the ball and we're not even a top 10 player anymore. So it's really Nvidia, AMD, there's a few Chinese companies as well, but Nvidia are really much the only game in town when it comes to producing AI training chipsets, so GPUs, which has allowed them to make a huge amount of money. So whatever they have to sell, people will buy. And as we just saw on eBay, the prices for reselling shoot through the roof as well. There's a lot of money to be made here. So if there's an offer on the table of the H20 chips, even if they are nerfed, they will get purchased. I'm sure as many as Nvidia can produce, that will be how many are purchased. They'll do fine. Yeah, ByteDance. Tencent, buy Nvidia, ByteDance, buy Nvidia. Yeah, I mean, everyone. If you want to train an AI model, you buy Nvidia, the only one. And it's going to take other companies a long time to catch up, because Nvidia, when it started, I'm old, so I remember Nvidia from graphics cards. So buying like the GeForce 256, I think it was called, which was one of their first graphics cards for 3D games processing. Nvidia had been doing this stuff for years. It just so happened that the same technology used to render pixels on the screen and 3D polygons is the same technology roughly used to train AIs, because it is massively parallel. Because when you're rendering a screen full of pixels, you have to render them all at the same time to make that image complete, and for it to trick the eye into thinking something is happening on the screen, if it's animated. That same technology of rendering a whole screen of pixels in parallel all at the same time, that is similar to what is needed for training artificial intelligences. So they lucked out, but they also did a huge amount of development into CUDA and other technologies to allow them to take this position. Phew. And we have a few more bits and pieces. I thought this was an interesting one. It's more of an opinion piece. Pity the policymakers in the AI jobs tsunami. So it's an opinion piece from the Financial Times. Some weird image at the top. So basically talking about how difficult it must be for anyone in government, or anyone who's making policies in companies, or anyone who's trying to protect employment. Like, how are they meant to deal with this? And I think a lot of governments are feeling overwhelmed with this right now, for good reason. The speed at which AI is changing means any policy, a law, any kind of guidance you give people is going to change all of the time. And they give a really good example here of as things like mining started to fail. That was back in the 70s and 80s in the UK, but more recently in America, lots of mines being shut down. The popular policy from governments was to retrain people into other jobs. And more recently, it's been coal to code. So it's taking American miners, getting them out of the coal mines and teaching them how to code. And that was a big governmental policy. So it's retraining unemployed coal miners in the US as entry-level computer programmers, which has not aged well because all of these people became coders. And now we have AI, which is saying, oh no, we don't need these coders anymore. We do not need entry-level coders because AI is going to take that job. So these poor guys have come out of the mine. There's been no job. They've retrained. They've learned Python. They've learned whatever. And then suddenly AI has come along and said, no, we don't need your skills anymore. For those individuals in particular, this sucks, really sucks. But it's just a good example of how governments and policymakers, it's very hard for them to keep ahead of what's changing and to make recommendations that are going to be viable for people. So with coal mining, that was one particular industry which was declining. So there's one group of people, coal miners, who had to be retrained. We're now going to see something much larger because it's going to get so many industries at the same time. So this question of what advice do we give? What should we be telling students? What should we be telling our children? What should we be telling the unemployed and people looking for jobs? It becomes a much larger question because it's not just one industry, it's just everybody. Everybody is going to have to be dealing with this right now. And the one thing I actually wanted to point out, here we go. What else could policymakers do proactively? It'd be wise to shore up the social safety net for a world of work in which people go it alone, either through choice or necessity. So young people unable to find a foothold in large companies might find it easier and cheaper these days to start a business on their own, thanks to AI coding and marketing tools. Experienced workers pushed out by employers keen on automation might choose to set up boutique competitors that promise a human touch. But the self-employed often slip through the holes in the social security system, especially when it comes to pensions. So this is something that I've been banging the drum about. You can no longer rely on your employer. Yes, you might have a 9-to-5 salary now. Yes, maybe you've had it for the last few decades and it's been very safe. That is no longer safe, especially if your company, the company you work for, is not investing into AI. If they're not training people on how to use AI, they're probably going to get swept away, either by another competitor who is using AI or just by AI in general, removing the need for your company or even your industry as a whole. And it is coming for so many industries. What I think is a really not a safe bet, but a smart bet is to start something of your own as well. What that allows is flexibility. So if you are running some kind of business, it could be a service, it could be you build a product, it could be your freelancing, advising, consulting, whatever it is, that gives you flexibility to move around what happens with AI, because the main difficulty is we do not know what is going to happen. Any prognostication, any prediction that even someone like me or anyone gives you is probably going to be wrong. Like, we do not know. So you need to be flexible and quick on your feet. And that's hard to do if you have a job because you are at the whims of basically what they say. So having something on the side, it could be a business, could be freelancing, could be anything, but any kind of source of income on the side is a really smart idea right now. And I would be setting aside time to, one, learn how to use AI as effectively as possible, and two, starting to use that AI to build a business and to generate an income. So my newsletter is all about this. So every single week I put out a playbook, which is, this is how you use AI to do X. This is how you use AI to come up with business ideas. This is how you use AI to find your first customers, how you use it for working out what competitors are doing, leapfrogging them, etc. So it's combining my years of entrepreneurship and my MBA, which I never really used until now, plus my work in marketing, digital marketing in particular, and artificial intelligence. I'm trying to help people work out, okay, how do I build something on the side which is going to keep me safe moving forward? Because I think this is a really big question. And I personally think this is the smartest play, is to build something that you control. So that's why I wanted to flag it up, because it agrees with me. We like it when people agree with us, obviously. Cool. I will answer a few more questions and then I'm going to hop off. John says, what's wrong with just living off what the robots produce? Yeah. So this is a big question. The biggest question, what's going to happen if the jobs are taken? So let's say AI does come along and it takes the jobs, and robots come along and they take the jobs, and we are left not having to work. So that could be idyllic, but it's only idyllic if our basic needs are met. And our basic needs will only be met if the people in charge, basically, so the governments and the corporations, get their act together and work out things like UBI, Universal Basic Income, or we take control from them and set up some alternative. The problem with no one working is that capitalism, which we've been using for the last couple of hundred years, is dependent on people working. People work in order to earn a salary, and then they spend that salary and they spend their income on goods and services which other businesses are producing. By buying those goods and services, the other businesses can then afford to pay salaries to their workers, and it goes in a loop like this. And if you knock the salaries out of that, then you've got a lot of people sitting around at home who no longer have money to spend. And we're seeing this right now with the recession. People do not have disposable income, so they're not spending money. And that means that lots of businesses collapse because they can no longer operate, and therefore they cannot pay their workers' salaries. And then we end up with more people with no jobs, and the whole thing just crumbles down. So the problem here is AI and robotics could potentially automate this stuff, but then we have a lot of humans who are not earning a wage, who therefore cannot consume, and therefore capitalism collapses. It's the underpinning of it all. It shouldn't work, but it's worked for the last couple of hundred years, mainly. Obviously, capitalism has its problems too. But if we do automate or work away, we need to come up with an alternative. Could be socialist, could be UBI. We do not know. This is not something we've done before. So this is the big question. It's a question that also doesn't matter to us individually. Humanity as a whole will probably work this out over the next 100 years. We have to. But that doesn't help the people today who are sitting and thinking, God, what do I do? What do I do next week? What do I do next month? What do I do in the next couple of years? What are my kids going to do? This doesn't help the people like the coal miners who lost their jobs in the coal mine, learned to code, and now are being told, no, we don't need you because we have AI. Those individuals, they've been screwed all the way through. And the potential here is that we are going to have generations of people who just get absolutely demolished by artificial intelligence. Yeah, sure, in 100 years' time, maybe we've worked out UBI, maybe we've worked out how to basically never work and we can dedicate ourselves to art, etc. But until then, it's going to be messy. And we need to work out how we navigate through that with the minimum harm to the maximum number of people as possible. And that's a big question. That's a huge question, which requires people discussing it in good faith and working out the best thing to do. And unfortunately, it's difficult because so many people have emotive responses to AI, either fear and terror, and therefore they're not going to be able to discuss how we use it positively, or they're overly optimistic about it and think that AI is going to solve all our problems. We need to race ahead. Like with most things, the answer is generally in the middle. Unfortunately, it's never as exciting as we think it is. And we need to work this out. But that's a huge question. There's nothing wrong with living off what the robots produce. We just need to make sure that there is enough that we can do without leaving 80% of the world in abject poverty. I'm going to finish up because I'm at an hour. So what did we cover today? We talked about a lot of Elon Musk. It's hard not to, unfortunately. So Grok and other AIs being integrated into the Department of Defense with the 800 million potential contract. We talked about how Grok is pretty good, considering that they've only been around for 2 years and they've caught up by spending a huge amount of money on 100,000 H100 chips plus and training very quickly. But they're sitting around the 14th place when it comes to actual people using it day to day, because it looks like they've overfitted to the model. If you want to know more about that, I very much recommend you look at Nate B. Jones's video. I think it just came out yesterday. So he talks about how models can be overfitted. Really good videos on YouTube. And then we talked about the chipsets themselves as H100s versus H20s, and the fact that China is going to be sold the H20s once again. And then we finished up by talking about the AI job tsunami. So I am going to be no, I'm not. So I'm off to France tomorrow morning, so there will be no live tomorrow. I'm going to try to do lives from Paris, but it's going to depend a little bit on the internet connection. Certainly won't be as nice looking as this because I'm not taking my YouTube setup with me. So if you do not see me over the next few days, that's because I'm in France, but I will be back next week and next Monday, definitely for sure. And thank you so much. And as always, all of these lives, we clean them up, we tidy them, and we put them on YouTube, including individual clips, which allow you to go to a particular segment. So if you don't have time, obviously, to sit through and watch this every morning, not a problem. The clips will be available on YouTube, and there's also a newsletter which comes out every day. There's a link in my bio which allows you to get that's free, which is basically a rundown of everything that's been discussed and direct time codes to the links. So you can find things that are relevant to you and go straight there and see what the discussion is about. So cool. I will see you either over the next few days from France, internet dependent, or on Monday. Thank you so much and talk soon.